Hello, my name's Amanda Smith. I'm from the Centre for Alternative Technology. I'm really pleased to be joining the South Yorkshire Schools Climate Conference today to lead a workshop on Zero Carbon Britain rising to the climate emergency. So Zero Carbon Britain is a toolkit to help us think differently and begin to visualise a positive future. But first, we need to recognise that we face a climate and biodiversity emergency. Across many nations, humanity has become physically locked into high carbon ways of doing things. And that means that the earth around us, the earth that supports all life, is facing real challenges. Humanity has caused a climate emergency. We see those changes all around us. We hear people like David Attenborough talking about them. We hear about it on the news. We hear of floods. We hear of droughts. We hear of fires. The climate is changing. The weather that we see out of the window is changing, and the weather patterns over time, the climate is changing too. So to pick up on the scientific trail of what's today is known as the greenhouse effect, we need to look back a long way to 1859. Tyndall showed that gases, including carbon dioxide and water vapour, can absorb heat. So energy from the sun reaches the earth. Some energy is absorbed by the Earth's surface, and the extra heat goes back into the atmosphere. Some energy goes back into space, but greenhouse gases trap some of this heat, and this is the greenhouse effect. The more greenhouse gases there are, the more heat is trapped, and the Earth warms. A simple explanation is to think of this process as adding extra blankets to the Earth. The climate is warming, so why is it happening? And since the start of industrial revolution, it's warmed at a really increasing and rapid rate. In fact, this is an unusual situation compared to any historical or even present day geographic precedent to be using so much of our stored energy bank account every single day. So I'd like you to take a look at this graph. You'll see the years along the x-axis and the tonnes of oil equivalent per person up on the y-axis, and we've got nuclear shown in red, gas in yellow, oil in black, coal in green, hydro and renewables in blue, and wood in brown. Just have a look at those and look at the years and look at the increase in the amount of use of each of the different kinds of fuel. And I'd like you to just think about why that might be happening. So climate breakdown can really be called a wicked problem. Back in 1973, design theorists Horst Rittel and Melvin Webber developed the term for problems that had got many feedbacks, deeply ingrained in a system and with no single solution. And those feedbacks making the problem worse and more complicated. And I've put this big red knot on the slide just to illustrate just how complicated the climate problem is and just what a wicked problem it is. But wicked problems need wicked solutions. And we're going to go on to think about some of those later. But first of all, we need to recognise those wicked problems for what they are. So I've put 6 examples here of the way that the climate emergency is a wicked problem. We'll just look at a couple of them now, but you might like to pause the slide and look at these in more detail or come back to it later. So the one on the top left, the one that we all know about, that we hear a lot about, the vanishing Arctic ice. So the temperature rises, the Arctic sea melts, and as the reflective ice disappears, the darker ocean waters absorb more heat, the temperature goes up, more ice vanishes, and so the cycle goes on. If we look down at the bottom left-hand corner, the Amazon rainforest die-off. So again, we have the rise in temperature. That leads to drought, and wildfires then increase in the Amazon. More trees die and decompose or burn, releasing carbon dioxide, which again contributes to temperature rise and causes that cycle to repeat. And fewer rainforest trees mean less water is pumped into the atmosphere, the rainfall decreases, the rainforest dies off, and so on. And each of those have a similar pattern. So it's a real cycle of repeating change and worsening change. So the earth that supports all life is facing real challenges. What we do know is that humanity has caused the climate emergency, and this graph shows really well the link between man-made emissions and global CO2. So I'd like you to pause the video for a moment And if your teacher could click on the link above, that will take you through to a YouTube clip which will show you this carbon dioxide pump handle, which is absolutely amazing. When you've had a chance to look at it and think about the material that you've reviewed, I'd like you to discuss for 10 minutes. Think about where and when have there been big increases in energy consumption over time, and why do you think this is? Obviously, if you want longer to discuss and make the session slightly longer, that's absolutely fine. But take a look at the graph we looked at earlier and the carbon dioxide pump handle to help you to answer that question. So moving on now to think a little bit more about this. So our physical landscapes, the one that we inherit and are compelled to inhabit, has been designed with high energy carbon blind infrastructure. Our transport systems have been designed with the petrol car at their core. The things we buy have been designed to break, and millions of badly insulated homes have been built miles from where we work or where we buy things. Also, if we think about our psychological landscape, we've become culturally locked into high carbon lifestyles. We are told that if we buy more, eat more, travel more, and spend more, we'll be happy. These have been cleverly associated with success and happiness, so they exert a deep and powerful influence shaping the choices that define our lives. These ways of living have led us into a climate and ecological emergency which contains many amplifying feedbacks which make it worse if we don't act fast. Governments and businesses have known about these problems for decades, and the lack of clear action has led many of us to a state of climate and ecological anxiety. We hear the term eco-anxiety. So governments and councils are trying very hard to do something about the climate emergency. So the map of the UK over on the left shows all of the councils, and this is a little bit out of date now, there are more to add, but this shows all of the councils who've declared a climate emergency and are trying to do something about it. You'll have heard talk of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP, which is taking place in the UK in 2021. We hope that COP26 will take place face to face, but we'll see. But whatever happens, the idea is that leaders come together and discuss the problems which face us all. The Paris Agreement, which we hear about, came from the COP in Paris, where the target to keep warming to a legally binding limit was decided back in 2015. And the goal there was to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the targets that governments and councils are setting for themselves are to comply with that target. Fortunately, we've witnessed a seismic shift in collective action to prevent climate change, which has changed the national political and cultural narratives in a great way. Lots of people and organisations across the UK, not just councils, lots of people are developing climate emergency action plans for their local areas, and we're working with local governments to explore net zero transformations in transport, energy, housing, food, waste, buildings and land use. So since 2007, the Centre for Alternative Technologies Zero Carbon Britain work has been modelling an end point to show we already have the technologies we need and to open conversations around how we need to change. We work with councils, with governments, with organisations and individuals to help them decide what to do to get to net zero. Our work shows that to rise to the climate emergency, we need to do more than attach wind turbines, PVs and electric cars to business as usual. We need to recognise that we have been led into living extreme energy lifestyles, and so we must power down our energy use while powering up clean energy. The key part of the solution is being able to imagine a positive future. It's really good to dim the lights and practice imagining a positive future. Flex those underused brain muscles. It's kind of like doing star jumps for the mind. And better still, have the evidence base to back it up, especially if you want to convince your neighbours and those around you and those all important politicians. So what do we mean by power down? We currently use far more energy than we actually need to deliver society's goals. Power down is the process by which we make a significant, something like 60% reduction of our energy demand using efficient technology and making important changes to the way we live, the way we travel, the way we eat and the way we shop, so we can begin by delivering society's goals in a smart 21st century way. Power down makes it possible to fully meet our energy needs by powering up the UK's own renewable energy sources. So, power up is modelling the right mix of generation technologies using 10 years of hourly data. Our Zero Carbon Britain research shows how we can keep the lights on. It opens conversations about clean energy options available to the UK. The British Isles is Europe's wild and windy western fringe and gives us some of the best wind power resources in the world. If the model was for Greece or Egypt, we'd use different mixes. Wind power also has the advantage that wind speeds are stronger during the winter season when energy demand is highest. And currently, most UK wind turbines are installed on land, on shore, but the greatest potential is out at sea, offshore. So power up and power down. A smart approach to energy use, we can reach 100% of our energy needs. So I'd like you just to pause the video again now and take a look at these two links. So this is about the power up side of things and looks at how many renewables we're using today. So the links below take you through to a live site, which will actually tell you exactly how power is being generated on a given day. I prefer the second link, the old one, possibly because I'm more familiar with it, but the gridwatch.co.uk /old GW equals that one gives you a series of dials which show you exactly how power is being generated on any given moment in the day. The gridwatch.co.uk, the new site, goes into a lot more detail, but it would be really good if you took a moment to look at both of those and just see exactly where our power is coming from today, how much of it is coming from renewables and which renewables are we using. And then I'd like you to just pause the video again and discuss for a few minutes in your group. So what stands out for you about powering up and powering down and why? So moving on, we need to think about how we use land too. How can we encourage biodiversity, provide the food we need and capture carbon as well? The Zero Carbon Britain model explores how the robust and resilient production of healthy food, genuinely sustainable land management and new income streams for farmers form a vital part of any collective future vision for humans and for the natural systems that we depend on. Rethinking our diets to eat a healthier mix of food frees up land for other uses and reduces our emissions. We're not saying don't eat meat and only eat vegetables. We're just saying we need to think about it differently. And if you have a look at the two graphs there, you'll see the one on the left is the average diet today. The one on the right is the average diet that's recommended in the Zero Carbon Britain report. Both of those scenarios are shown relative to the Eat Well guide. The recommendations of the Eat Well guide are in the centre there. The other thing about our food is the tragedy of how much food we waste, and cutting food waste is a really important part of the Zero Carbon Britain scenario. So we said a few slides back that a key part of the solution is being able to imagine a positive future. And that's what we want to start to do now. We want to think about what changes we need to make and how we can make those changes happen. How will you change the world? So some of the work we do with councils is supported and helped by using this model. So this is called the 4 directions. It's found in our reports and I've given you the links in the accompanying lesson notes. But the 4 directions model is about how individuals, how organisations, how anyone can make change happen simultaneously in 4 key directions. So if we were thinking about a council, They would be looking downwards at the things they control immediately. So things like they could install solar energy, they could look at transport, they could look at the way they procure food and the land use, etc. They could work sideways, leading by example, showing others how to act. They could share their plans with each other and act together. Sharing real life projects and the stories of what's gone well and what hasn't worked quite so well is a really powerful way of learning. Some things just can't be changed either within your own control by working with others, and that needs lobbying upwards. So they might need to look at lobbying government, UK government, devolved government. They might need to lobby upwards in their own organisation. And the inwards bit is what you're doing today, is really finding out what's going on and how you can make a difference. So getting trained about the emergency, the climate emergency, its causes, the solutions and the roles they can play. So this is a model, as I said, that we've used really effectively with a council. And what I'd like you to do today is to use a similar model to really think about what Britain could be like without emissions. Imagine that you run a government department or council. What can you do to help get to net zero? I'd like you to choose one of the themes that we've been talking about, either energy, you might be thinking about powering up or powering down even. You might be thinking about food, about what we can eat, what we can grow, what we can source, how we should eat. You might want to think about transport, which sits really well in the power down side of things. And you might want to think about stuff, all that stuff that we buy. How could that be done differently? So choose one of these themes, and what I'd like you to do, I've sent a template over which gives you the 4 directions to work on, and I'd like you to work together and think about one of those themes. Use the Zero Carbon Britain research to support you, or your own knowledge of what's happening in the news around you, in your local area, in your school, in your community, to think about if you were running a government department or a council, what would you do with energy, with food, with transport, with stuff to help to get to net zero? So I've allowed 20 minutes in the lesson plan for this, but please be guided by the time that your teacher is able to allow for this piece of work. And what I would like you to do is, when you're gathering your thoughts together, if you could elect a spokesperson or spokespeople to actually present to the rest of the group what your solution is. So I hope you've had a really good time researching that, and I'm sure you've come up with some brilliant ideas, and I'm really sorry that this isn't a live presentation, because I would absolutely love to hear what you've thought about and what you plan to do to get to net zero. But I can't do that. What I'd like you to do is present your findings so far to each other and share the steps that you will take to get to net zero. So what does this all mean for the UK? Well, the great thing about the future is that anything can happen. As we've seen recently under lockdown, with new food supplies, new cycling routes and more home working, life has changed almost beyond recognition in some aspects. Many radical changes throughout history have shown us that we are bold, innovative, creative, and often surprising as individuals and societies. So with ideas like the ones that you've shared today, we can go from this, where we've got high energy use, high CO2 emissions, low land use. We have a total of over 500 emissions there. We can go from that to this. Net zero is achievable with ideas like the ones that you've shared today. Zero Carbon Britain clearly demonstrates that the technologies needed to power down demand and power up clean energy are ready and waiting. Changes in land use, reduced food imports and healthier diets make us more resilient and capture residual emissions. And it's not just the UK that's rethinking the future. A powerful motivator is to recognise that a zero carbon future also holds the potential to be one of the most exciting opportunities in human history. It offers us the chance to simultaneously resolve many other pressing problems. If we think across silos, actions on the climate emergency can also help solve a wide range of other challenges, such as healthier diets, cleaner air, more and better jobs, easier to heat homes, more active mobility, increased connection with nature, and in the process it can deliver a rich sense of collective purpose and meaning, which we have been craving for a very long time. If you'd like to find out more about our work, do look at www.cat.org.uk. We've got Zero Carbon Britain reports on there. We've got free webinars, digital hub. We've got news about our innovation lab and the training that we offer. All of this can help trigger the new conversations, the skills and the actions needed to ensure the well-being of current and future generations. So do visit us at www.cat.org.uk. I hope that you've enjoyed this workshop and that some of the ideas that you're taking forward will be useful for you. Thank you.